Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So perhaps you're like me and you've long held this belief that the Federal Reserve is this tentacled beast that has been enslaving America since its inception. And I would say that that's very, very true. However, according to my guest today, Tom Luongo, things have changed. So I just finished this discussion with him, which could have gone for many more hours, but I have to say it was one of the most fascinating discussions I've had in recent memory. And not only was it fascinating, but it made me challenge a lot of the very core beliefs I have about what's really happening right now. And Tom doesn't just present ideas that are unfounded. Everything that he presents in this discussion is backed with a lot of information and evidence. It's apparent the guy is a walking encyclopedia, especially as it relates to the global financial system and global geopolitics. There's a few things though that you're going to see in this interview that will absolutely shock you, most likely. So he talks about how he believes that in 2016, when Trump got in, that the course of the financial system in America changed drastically, and that Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve actually have saved the American people from the fate, pardon me, from the fate of a central bank digital currency and a global one world financial system. Now, I know it seems counterintuitive and it maybe stirs your bones in a weird way to think, wait, the Fed isn't this evil thing. And look, it is, and it needs to be abolished, in my opinion. And I think that's also the opinion of my guest as well. But the point that he's making, which you'll see this expanded in much more greater detail, is that there is a war going on between the different banking cartels. It's not some unified system like you might expect, that the head of the pyramid is the European banking cartel and all the central banks report to that, but actually that there's a much bigger picture war that's happening. And this war relates to the election, it relates to what's happening with Trump, it relates strongly to what's happening with Ukraine and Russia and so much more. So I hope that you can enter into this conversation with an open mind. That's what I did. And I can tell you that I walked away from it thinking I just learned so much more information I did not know, and I have a lot more questions. I will also give you a quick warning that Tom doesn't mind using the F word and a few other swear words. So if you have children around that you don't want hearing these kinds of words, he maybe says the F word 5 times. Usually, he's a pretty passionate guy, so it comes out in his fits of passion, which I understand. But just giving you the warning that if you have children, you might want to cover their ears or put this on your AirPods or whatever it is. So anyway, folks, I hope you enjoy this interview with Tom Luongo, and if you learn something from it, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think, because this is, again, it's an idea that is very different than the narrative that's pushed by a lot of people that are, much more the alternative media, which is just in the Fed, in the Fed, in the Fed. And his point is that the Fed is our greatest weapon against the global banking cartel. I want to hear what your thoughts are afterwards. So folks, please enjoy the interview with Tom Luongo. Mr. Tom Luongo, it's great to have you back on. It's been quite a while, and thank you for being here with us today.
Sure. I'm happy to have been reminded that this call was actually supposed to happen.
Yes.
I at this point, I don't know if I have to outsource my my scheduling to all the people that I've said yes to. But there it is. So and the funny part about it is that I've even promised my partner Dexter White I do say no every once in a while. I really do. This is the problem, but so
that's just how it
there
is.
it is.
So
Yeah.
you're someone that I always appreciate your take on things, because you don't follow the main narrative, and not because
Mm,
everyone who does is just like an ignorant sheep. I think there's a lot of reason to follow the main narrative, but what you're bringing to the
Sure.
table is a very different perspective, and especially in terms of the crossover of giant, finance, geopolitics, global banking, et cetera. And
Mm,
let's just dive right in. There's one particular tweet that was what caused me to reach out to you. So this was,
Sure.
right after there was the instance where basically, Jerome Powell said, "I won't step down if asked," basically, and everyone's saying, "Oh, look, we got to end the Fed. Trump doesn't have any control over it." And you put this tweet here, and I'll just kind of highlight through this. You're saying a lot of people are waking up this morning to the force-fed narrative of FOMC Chair Powell saying he wouldn't step down if asked by Trump. Libertarians are screaming. Conceptual James Lindsay, woke right are out in force, reading like 4B chicks after they chopped off their hair. But we were saying, though, is that Powell's response wasn't a flex. It was a statement to Davos et al. That the Fed doesn't work for them anymore. Its independence under Powell won us the election. The commercial banks that Trump is going to activate to rebuild America took a punch in the mouth as the Fed raised rates hard to drain the world. The howls you hear this morning are all in Europe, not China, not Russia, not Iran, the UK, and the EU. Stop carrying water for the people who hate you, because that's what you're doing right now with this in the Fed BS. We'll end the Fed, but after we've broken the BIS, the IMF, the ECB, and most importantly, the damn Bank of effing England. So that really caught me off guard. I was like, oh, okay, this is much bigger picture, right? Because than I thought. So I'll hand it over to you because I want to learn from you, from the horse's mouth, like what's coming into this? What do you see happening, and what's behind that information you're putting out there?
Sure. The long and the short of it is that when we had globalists running the Federal Reserve was a globalist institution. Let's just like kind of start there, okay? And it's 90% of the end the Fed narrative is based on that, or 95 or 98% of it is based on that idea. The problem is, and that Jerome Powell is not a globalist in the same sense that Bernanke was and Yellen was. And I don't know about Greenspan. I just think he was a social climber and a weak man. Paul Volcker, we could make a lot of inferences about. But the reality is that the Fed is a weapon, and it has incentives. It's an organization. It's an organization with a mission statement. It's an organization with principle about what its job is. And its job fundamentally is to serve its shareholders, and its shareholders are the commercial banks of the United States. Now, no one would argue with me about any of those statements. And generally speaking, we can even talk about those things in the pejorative, right? But in the context of where we are today and the war that's actually being fought, which is ultimately a war between central banks for control over the future of money, who do you want in your corner? Do you want the Fed in your corner? Or do you want to work for the ECB? Or do you want to work for the BOE? Or do you want to work for the BIS? Or do you want to work for the IMF? Or do you want to work for the PBOC over in China? Or, the Bank of Russia does not matter.
So let me ask just a quick question about what you said there. I think that one thing that I've come across, and I do it myself, I don't like it, is that people tend to oversimplify. Good guy, bad guy. You look at the banking system, and there's this idea that, the entire banking system is one big system. It's a pyramid at the top, or the European banking cartel, and that every central bank reports to this. And so you think that every central bank around the world is all part of the same evil network, and they're all bad. But you just mentioned that there's central banks that are warring even within themselves. So can you elaborate as you're explaining this?
When everybody was making money and everything was fat and happy and globalism was on the march and everybody was making money off of globalism, including the U.S. commercial banks, then everybody's probably, sucking on the same straw, as it were. But when that system starts to hit the rocks, and this is where I get angry, actually, with my Misesian / libertarian cohorts, and I say, look, y'all were right. The central banking cartel is managed everything, and it's about to collapse. Now, during the breakdown of that cartel, did all of a sudden did IQs drop suddenly, to quote Ripley from Aliens, or when the cartel starts to collapse, do cartel members not turn on each other?
Which I think you could,
all of a sudden we just throw all that out the window because we have we have an agenda that states it looks like X, and it's always going to be that way, and we can't ever look at things from the context of that. So all I'm arguing here in this, and I'll get into the specifics of this in a minute, all I'm really arguing is that the system's breaking down. It needs a reset. The British are trying to meme us into a freaking war with the Russians as we do this. as we record this. And people are still sitting here telling me that the Fed like works for these guys after the Fed just spent 3 years raising interest rates, holding them at 5.25%, and literally drained the Eurodollar markets of trillions of dollars of capital. And because of that, forced move after move after move after move by the Biden administration, the ECB, the Bank of England, and everybody that I've chronicled at like every friggin' small little turn over the last 3 years from this perspective. And the only conclusion you can draw is that the Fed helped win us this election. Why? Because Powell held interest rates at 5.25%, 5.25% to 5.5% until September, when at December of last year, the whole world was screaming the Fed's going to cut 7 times in 2024. I'm like, no, they're not. Like, who put that idea in your head? Oh, well, all of the people that the Biden administration and the holdovers from the Obama years on their dot plot, which they pulled out at that moment in time. When you watch politics, when you watch these people operate, they lie in wait. Evil does. This is that line from Zack Snyder's Justice League all over again. Evil doesn't sleep, it waits. So when you have someone like John McCain in the Senate, or you have Mitt Romney or Lisa Murkowski, or you put Lisa Cook or Sarah Bloom Raskin on the FOMC board, these people don't do anything. They just lie in wait until the moment comes when they need to be pulled off the shelf, activated like Plan R from Dr. Strangelove, and create a narrative. And that narrative in December was the Fed has to cut interest rates by seven times in 2024 in order to bully the Fed into doing so. And then you see policy implemented by the people who have the ability to pull the levers to make that narrative look correct. And it's a bullying process. And they tried bullying the Fed. They tried bullying Powell for 3 years to stop raising interest rates, and then to start cutting early, as always. But what I said from the beginning of this was that from the moment it became obvious that the secured overnight financing rate, SOFR, which is now the debt indexing rate for all dollars around the world, was replacing LIBOR. Once that was in place, then all of these people over there in the Eurodollar, the offshore dollar markets, no longer had control over had the ability to really control domestic dollar markets and domestic lending and the liquidity profile of the domestic economy, the domestic banking system, which is where everything lives. The whole world lives on these pools of liquidity, which we can't measure, and we can't actively measure, but we can see the reflection of and how markets price themselves. Like the markets are a reflection of that thing that we can't see. It's like there are many metaphors that I would have to go down in order to try and talk about this, but it's like reality is here and there's this false projection on the wall. They want us to believe the projection on the wall when reality is over here. Okay. So, pick your Philip K. Dick poison, or I've got a perfect metaphor from Babylon 5 for this and how the Minbari see God, but I would take me 15 minutes to set that metaphor up, so let's not go there. But anybody who's watched Babylon 5, remember this, you know what I'm talking about. Now, which is that we're looking at the reflection. All we can look at is the reflection. We can't see the actual things. We can't see the liquidity, but we can see the result of the liquidity and how markets price themselves. So Powell clearly has been draining the offshore dollar markets since he started stealth tightening in the middle of 2021, before he started raising interest rates. By him doing that, that signaled that they needed to get rid of him for a second in order to stop him from raising rates in the second term if he got one. So they spent 6 months trying to stop him from getting reconfirmed. They ran out of room. I don't want to go into the details on this. I've covered it in 100 podcasts. They ran out of room. Biden eventually had to put his name up for reconfirmation because he didn't have any other options, and he passed the Senate 80-20.
Imagine a future where your wealth is untouchable, a future where every decision you make today creates a foundation of security for tomorrow. Right now, optimism fills the air. A new chapter under Trump is beginning and opportunities seem endless. Markets are climbing, spirits are high. But beneath the surface, whispers of change grow louder. Policies, tariffs, and global shifts are shaping a new economic landscape. The US dollar holds strong, but what happens when the world questions its place, which is already happening? What happens when nations turn away from the familiar and toward the uncertain? Gold is different. For centuries, it has been an anchor in the times of change, a hedge against inflation, a shield against volatility, a sanctuary when the world feels unsteady. Gold doesn't follow the tides, it remains steadfast, unyielding, and enduring. Close your eyes and imagine your wealth secure. Imagine your future unshaken. This is the promise of gold, a tangible investment free from the whims of politics and markets. The time to act is now. While optimism reigns and markets soar, remember that true wisdom comes from preparing for what others cannot see. Gold is not just an investment, it is your anchor, your protection, your legacy. Take the first step towards securing your future. And there's no better company to work with than Noble Gold. Protect your future. Act now. Call 626-654-1906 or visit goldwithseth.com to get your free gold and silver investment guide. Again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com.
A week later, the war in Ukraine breaks out. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, Powell starts raising interest rates. Okay. And then he just goes on the most historic run imaginable. Now, at the time, everybody said, well, there's no way he'll go past up 1%. The whole thing will collapse. I'm like, under the LIBOR system, absolutely. Under SOFR, no. He's going to go to 6%. I said 6% at the time. I was off by 50 basis points.
Can you just give a real quick, because I remember I interviewed you before and we covered SOFR and LIBOR and how that affects, I think that's a very central point to this. I think for a lot of the audience, they may not recognize those terms. Can you give me like a, I'm like a kindergartner, explain SOFR, LIBOR, and how that affects the global financial markets?
The hard part here is that, LIBOR grew out of the birth of the Eurodollar system, which is where we had all these dollars. We created the dollar reserve standard, right? We put all these dollars around the world to settle global trade, but nobody had a good way to price those dollars. So eventually we wound up with LIBOR. And LIBOR was a rate that was determined by 18 City of London banks, or European and City of London banks. One of which is the only American bank in the mix there was JP Morgan's London office. The rest of them are all, European banks, and they're telling us what they think the price of dollars should be at, 5:00 every day. They get on the phone, they call each other up, and they say, boom.
Well, the Fed raises rates that affects the money in America, but then so LIBOR is what allows them to.
Well, but so that it's actually quite complicated. And you want the kindergarten version? Let's just make it simple. Let's just make it simple. And I'm going to make an assertion here. I've covered this in multiple podcasts. I've covered this in grave detail, but basically, the Eurodollar system, because of the inherent leverage within it, because it's all private lending and it's all off balance sheet and it's all rife with corruption, is far more vulnerable to an interest rate hike by the Federal Reserve, raising the price of dollars, than the American economy is. And so, what we wound up with all during the LIBOR years is the Fed would raise interest rates to cool an overheated U.S. economy. It would cause a recession overseas, but because all of our debt was tied to their pricing index, then our debt got repriced in terms of their need for capital. And so the Fed would always cut interest rates because it would induce a recession here faster than it should have. Because
so much of the world is holding U.S. debt that when the Fed raises rates, you could have a little country in Europe that say half-point raise might collapse their economy because they're holding so much U.S.
collapse their banks or whatever. And
I see.
Their central bank would have to deal with it, blah, 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 blah. And it's just if the United States, let's just put it this way, if the neutral rate for the United States was say 6% and the Eurodollar system was 3.5%, the minute the Fed gets beyond 3.5%, they're in trouble.
Makes sense. Okay.
We need to raise the 6 in order to clear out the malinvestment. In Misesian terms, we need to clear out the malinvestment, refill the pool of real savings, and start the next business cycle. we're never allowed to do that because you know, City of London is literally setting the upper limit on what we can do. So they're in control of our monetary policy. So what we had was, up until SOFR, we weren't in control of our monetary policy. Jeff Snyder used to make this point all the time. As far as I'm concerned, Jeff revealed himself to be, I don't know that he's an agent of the City of London or he's just uninformed, but he didn't understand or anticipate the change in SOFR going back, and didn't understand that would change everything. And that because now the American economy can tell the Fed when to start cutting interest rates, as opposed to the rest of the world. So the rest of the world has been screaming for 2 years to stop raising interest rates, or to start cutting them. Every time there was another FOMC meeting, there'd be another sternly worded letter from Elizabeth Warren, who's one of their agents in our Congress, or another big media push from Reuters, the Financial Times, all of these freaking Davosian, City of London controlled outlets about how the Fed is, screwing things up. You have and they activate frankly, the zero hedge / Austro-libertarian set, who are predisposed towards hating the Fed in the first place, to carry their water for them, which is what I was saying in that tweet. Because then they go out and they immediately abreact and go, yes, the Fed is incompetent, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's nonsense. And the whole Powell printer go burr memes that went around in 2020 are particularly egregious, because Powell had no other choice but to monetize all this debt, because the United States Treasury market went bidless, which means that the American banking system had seized up. And that's his job, is to protect that. Like it or not, you can hate it, but it's true and it's reality. And it's also reality of your life, because if you hate that so much that you wanted Powell not to do that, well, then did you just stack 3 years worth of sardines and toilet paper and bullets? No, you didn't. You're not prepared. So, fuck you. No. So that's the way this works. And that's the reality of the world. And myself and Daniel DiMartino Booth are literally the only ones out there screaming, this had to be done this way. Like it or not, the Fed is doing the right thing. Why? Now, what's their incentive? Their incentive is simply because and why would the commercial banks go along with this, knowing it would blow massive holes in their balance sheets? And everybody's like, well, the banks are going to collapse and the interest on the debt's going to go out of control. I'm like, yeah, that's a feature, not a bug. The banks understood that they were facing existential threat, because if the Fed stayed at the zero bound, they were going to have no other option but to cede all of their power to the Eurodollar system, stay at the zero bound, and usher in MMT, UBI, CBDCs, perpetual war, all the surveillance, all the stuff that everybody's out there screaming about. I'm like, guys, that can be fixed with 6% interest rates. And they're like, no, they can't. No, we can't. I'm like, why? What do you know about any of this? Like, I've been studying this shit for 20 years. I can figure it out. I got news for you. The guys at the Fed can figure it out. And I got even more news for you. Jamie Dimon knows this better than you do. And I'll call out Whitney Webb and all these other people who literally said this is nonsense. I'm like, okay, stay black-pilled. You're wrong. Go to 6%. Watch them scream. It gets me very angry, because it's so very obvious what happened here. If you were willing to read things from if you just take your framework, shift it 90 degrees and look at it from the Fed and the commercial bank's point of view, clearly this is their option. And, the world is not simple. The world, everybody has their incentives. I have my incentives. You have yours. Jamie Dimon has his. Jerome Powell has his. Christine Lagarde has hers, and Klaus Schwab has his, and, blah, 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 blah. If you stay wedded to those things and you don't react in real time to the change in the game board, guess what? I got 140 board games down here that I will kick your ass in. Why? Because I can keep you off balance and keep you off your game, because I'm willing to look at what game you're trying to play, and I'll thwart that. I'll make one move which collapses your entire game, because your entire game is predictable.
So
okay, I don't care if we're talking about, okay, it doesn't matter, right? So that's what's going on here. That's all I did. And so now I'll back it up on, I'll finish this point.
Okay.
So what's important here is to understand that what was Davos putting on the table? The end of commercial banking. That's why they did this. That's why the US money center banks were willing to take a massive punch in the mouth for 2 years. Blow those holes in the balance sheets. The Fed turns around and creates some small facilities to make sure that there's liquidity behind the scenes. And the bank term funding program, for example, was one of those things. And everybody said everything that was ever written on Zero Hedge or everywhere else about any of the, but all about the BTFP was absolutely and completely and comically wrong. Comically wrong. So again, they didn't understand what it was. Like, wow, we put 100, some banks pledged 100 billion, bought $100 billion worth of loans. I'm like, in the banking system, $100 billion isn't like nothing. We're talking about trillions of dollars move in the currency markets every day. Really? I mean, if it was such a big deal, that thing, as Danielle put it multiple times, that thing would have been $2 trillion.
Okay.
Not 100 billion. It's a rounding error. So the reason they did this was because if the Fed lost this fight, then we would lose the commercial banking system. And we would wind up with central bank digital currencies and all the things that everybody's complaining about and all the things everybody's scared of. That was the path to central bank digital currencies. So because, no commercial banks, no private formation of capital, no community banks, no big mega banks, no big projects to build pipelines, no small projects to build libraries. You want a water treatment plant in your hometown? Sorry, you got to go ask Christine Lagarde for permission. Guess what? You think Christine Lagarde's going to give you permission? Hell, we got FEMA agents out there passing over people with Trump signs not to give them aid that they paid for. And you think that these people are not going to, tell us that we can't have a library in Palatka? What, are you out of your mind? Like, that's the plan. And that was the plan. And that was ultimately the plan to destroy America. They lost monetary control of the United States under Trump. What happened under Trump was Powell being put in at the Fed, John Williams being put in charge, the architect of SOFR, in charge of the New York Fed. He moved from the Atlanta Fed to the New York Fed. And then, that was that. And then they implemented it over a 5-year rollout period. And by 2022, SOFR was the law of the land. All new debt indexing, your car loans, everything was all denominated in SOFR. But this is why, and not LIBOR. So LIBOR is now dead. So this is why the Fed literally won us the election, because they were able to hold interest rates high until September, which pushed the economy down, and they kept saying, we're doing this because inflation is too high. We're doing this because inflation is too high. Crap. They were doing it to literally force out into the open all of America's enemies, financial and otherwise. And they were ensuring that under no circumstances was Kamala Harris going to be elected president. That was what they could do on their side of it. And they forced Janet Yellen to destroy the structure of our debt. And they all sorts of things that they did, which can all, by the way, be undone because it's a double-edged sword. So I can explain that. We can go forward on it. So that was why they did it. And then in September, when Powell cut by 50 basis points, that was a signal to global capital. Oh, by the way, yes, you're right. The U.S. markets, commercial real estate markets, and the credit markets are in worse shape than we thought. Then we let on. Here's 50 basis points and then another 25. And this is now to release the pressure on the banking system to allow credit to start flowing again. Look at what's happened to the yield curve in the 8 weeks since the first 50-point rate cut. We went from a deeply inverted yield curve to a flat yield curve. Now we're a flat yield curve. Now he cuts by another 50 basis points over the next 2 meetings. Now we have an upwardly sloping yield curve, just like we're supposed to have. And guess what, folks? For the first time in 4 years, honestly, for the first time in like 14 years, we have an upwardly sloping yield curve that's not like weird. And the banks can start lending. at a profit. They can borrow twos and they can borrow from the Fed against the short term and lend long. Now we can fund pipelines. Now the banks will give you a decent. Now we can start doing that. So as opposed to forcing the long end of the yield curve up even higher, now they can just bring it down. The reason that's even a problem, because the reality is that the U.S. 10-year should be trading a hell of a lot higher than 4.5%, probably closer to 5.5.
Let me ask you a question. How many of you are concerned that your privacy is being attacked? The deep state, including the DOJ, is invading individuals' private messages and targeting them based on their political affiliation. That's why I've partnered with Freedom Chat, a private social messaging app that, like me, believes privacy is a fundamental human right. Freedom Chat offers true end-to-end encryption, built-in screenshot protection to ensure that no one can screenshot your conversations, no storage of messages on their servers, and no commercial use of user data. This is the app that I trust, and it's the app that my family and I rely on, especially around this dicey election season until we get to the inauguration. Some people will stop at nothing to maintain power, making privacy protection more important than ever. So folks, download the app right now by going to freedomchat.com/man-in-America. Again, that's freedomchat.com/man-in-America. And look, I'm such a fan of Freedom Chat that I even have created my own private channel, which you can subscribe to for exclusive content. So simply download the app, search for my channel, and subscribe. No one can see the channels that you're subscribed to or the posts that you react to. It's your own private news feed. Speak freely and message privately with Freedom Chat. Again, download the app today and subscribe to my channel at Man in America for exclusive posts and content.
Fed funds rate probably needs to be around 3, but it's going to take us time to get there. And guess who's been buying the long end of the U.S. yield curve to stop that from happening? Europe. The proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the TIC data, which tells you that since September of 2021, Europe, the Bank of England, and all of its subsidiaries in the Caribbean, along with Canada, have bought over $1,100 billion worth of U.S. Treasuries net. Since September 2021, they bought over $1 trillion. Now, by the way, the Bank of England now has more U.S. Treasuries on its balance sheet directly than China does.
Oh, okay.
And
So
that's not including the British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, the Bahamas, the Caymans, Luxembourg, which has a ridiculous amount. Like, you couldn't carpet. You could take all the dollars that are on the balance sheet of the Luxembourg Central Bank and carpet Luxembourg with it, and you'd probably be able to do it twice. You could pave all of Luxembourg with the dollars that they supposedly control. It's the U.S. Treasuries they control. It's ridiculous. So when you and that amount has accelerated this summer when the U.S. 10-year was pushed down from 4.75% into the threes, while Janet Yellen was doing QE from the Treasury Department to push yields down, getting everybody to front run her buying the long end of the curve, right? It was an operation, and it was an operation to keep a lid on European sovereign debt, because if it got too high, if European sovereign debt went too high, then we were going to start seeing banks all over Europe explode. But at some point, you run out of other people's money. You run out of dollar reserves to sell into the market. Now the ECB, since the election, has been having to sell euros to buy dollars, to buy treasuries, to sell those dollars to buy treasuries. And that's why the euro is collapsing. That's why the pound is collapsing. And that's why everybody's moving all their money into the United States, because Donald Trump is like, I'm going to fix all this. And it's just hilarious to watch. I mean, I get up in the morning, I look at the euro, and yeah, good luck, Chrissy. Welcome to parity. Actually, welcome to 60 cents on the euro, because that's what's coming.
So let me kind of just give my understanding of what you've said so far to make sure that, because it's dense information, and I think I'm following it very closely, but I'm gonna summarize it. So basically, okay, one point, there's a lot of people that may have read Jekyll Island 20 years ago, and
Sure.
they have this idea that the Fed is evil, and they're not really updating it. Like, what you're doing is you're watching every day what's actually happening, and you're looking and seeing, okay, what are the real motives here? And so, as you mentioned, back when everything was going great, all the central banks were working in unison. They weren't fighting each other. It's like when a like a gang or a big cartel is doing
Sure.
really well, everyone's excited, everyone's making money. Okay, but when Trump got in, he put Powell in, changed some policies. Obviously, there's issues before that.
And at that point, I think the commercial banks saw their opportunities to get off the globalist train.
I see. Okay, so
You have
okay,
to realize that when there's no option for them to leave the system, then you go along with the system as best you can.
I see.
It's
So
similar to how all the Arab states went along with U.S. foreign policy depredations all across the Middle East until Putin moves into Syria in 2015 and blows everything wide open.
okay,
All of a sudden, the people who have no hope and they got their heads down, going along to get along and hoping for that moment when somebody when somebody says, okay, they blew up the Death Star. Okay, now we can rebel. Well, the same
I
thing's
see.
happened. The same thing happened all across the Middle East. Same thing is happening in the commercial banking space. Same thing is happening now. You're seeing it everywhere. I was like talking to a friend of mine who's substitute teaching in 8th grade in Alachua County in the city of Gainesville. He's like, on November 6th, all the kids were walking around with MAGA hats on. 8th graders. They were all Trump fans before that, but the social pressure was so intense in bluest of blue Alachua County that no way could they actually express that. All of a sudden, everybody's coming out of the woodwork. And the other thing, and this is the other dividend of Trump's win, is that if he gets through his cabinet picks, he's going to lift the pressure on all the junior CIA analysts who are trying to give good information, pass it up the chain, and the DOD analysts and everything else. The whistleblowers are going to come out left and right, along with the fact that the cartels, the suppression schemes are all breaking down. Now everybody's going to be sitting back in their house right now going, I've been burying their bodies for 20 years. I know where they all are buried. I've been keeping their secrets because if I didn't keep their secrets, I was going to die and my family was going to get, destroyed, and I was going to get debanked and unpersoned, and, they're going to pay a large Mexican $50 to kill me. How many of those are now saying, oh, maybe not. Maybe,
I see.
just maybe, I can go to Trump, metaphorically speaking, with this information and cut a deal for myself.
So
that's what you have to understand. That's the significance of what we've set up here.
I see. So
across every vertical.
So this is okay. I mean, it's much bigger than banking. Obviously, this is huge. Right? Intelligence agencies, military-industrial complex. I mean, it's the undoing of this whole system. But looking at banking, so basically, Trump gets in. He provides an off ramp for the Fed to basically exit from this kind of train careening in towards a globalist system, which had the intention that the global system wanted to collapse the banking system in America so they could, through unified ledger, through the BIS, IMF, et cetera,
right.
so they could then bring in
all those things that everybody's all worried about.
I see.
All those plans are all on the ropes.
I see.
Every bit of them.
So basically, you couldn't say it was necessarily.
Anybody who keeps telling you otherwise is lying to you.
I see.
I mean this sincerely. Under Powell, there will not be a retail CBDC over his dead body. There may be a wholesale CBDC called Fed Now.
Like bank
that's
to
just
bank,
changing
right?
the payment
I
layer.
see.
That's
okay.
Payment layer. That's level 2 stuff. That's no different than Lightning on top of Bitcoin.
So to save itself,
Lightning and Bitcoin are literally and these digital payment systems are forcing the Fed out of the middle of the 20th century, running their friggin' back offices on COBOL and AS360s.
I see. So basically, in essence, to save itself from doom, the Fed pivoted away from the globalist system to prioritize the American economy, the American system, which in essence also saved us from basically a one world currency, right?
Well, what I would actually say is it's actually even less controversial than that. They did it to save themselves.
Yeah.
And then as an extension of that, as a downstream effect of that, we benefit. Now, is it going to be meet the new boss same as the old boss 10 years from now? Yeah, probably. We'll fix that problem when we get to it. But we got to fix these other things first. We cannot in any way, manner, shape, or form castigate the Federal Reserve, which just literally is the only dragon out there with enough breath left to fight these freaking people.
Ah.
And you're going to just, no, let's get rid of that. It's
So the
like going
Fed
into
is
a war and saying, hey, let's go fight a ground war in eastern Ukraine, but we're going to arm everybody with kazoos. We're going to take those M4s and all that stuff and all the SIGINT and all the satellite intelligence. We're going to take all of that, and we're just not going to bring it to we're going to get rid of that. But
so the Fed,
let's throw some infantry troops in there with some kazoos and a couple of ukuleles and see if they'll start singing "Kumbaya" with us. Are you fucking out of your mind?
So
like literally, it's a war, and you're telling me that we should get rid of the army.
So like the Fed is like our megaton nuke. It's the only weapon that we have against the global central banking cabal. It's the only weapon that like the Fed.
It's the most powerful weapon on the earth,
Oh.
Seth.
So walk me through.
You would just like get rid of it.
Okay, so I'm getting this now. Okay, I'm on your wavelength, and it's a fun wave. I'm enjoying it. So walk me through how
Sure.
the Fed can bring down the Bank of England. So, and I guess before I ask that question, would you say that the Bank of England is the head of this beast that we're fighting? The head of the beast of the global banking cabal.
It's really the goal. I mean, the Bank of England is the centerpiece for all of perfidious Albion's perfidiousness. Let's not kid ourselves. Now, my good friend and partner in crime on all things London, Alex Craner, detailed for everybody over the summer the dire position that the Bank of England is in over debt to Ukraine, that it's guaranteed through the IMF, along with the holes in its balance sheet that it still hasn't fixed from the gilt crisis of 2022. Now, I have already done this before and I won't do it again. I wrote a big blog post about this back in October. It's trying to explain how even the British and their evil can be framed as victims in this, because you have to look at things from that perspective and see how they're being attacked by continental Europe and by extension sovereigntists within the US. So, okay, how do how do they respond to this, right? It's never about the move you just saw. It's about the move that's coming next. So the war in Ukraine, as we're finding out today, is an existential problem for continental Europe. And I've been saying this since the years before the war even came out, but I didn't have a good answer. I didn't have as nuanced a take on it then as I do now. And I really do credit, the dozens of conversations I've had with Alex Craner on this as we throw these ideas back and forth and we sharpen our pencil, right? And we start using that to draw a better picture. And what it comes down to is as follows. They don't have any collateral for their system. They want to collapse the existing system, but they need collateral to be able to, they need to collapse the current system. They need to default on all the debt, but then they need to have a source of collateral in order to bring a new system to bear. Because who's going to buy into the system if the system doesn't have any collateral? Now, in the West, collateral is generally cash flow. Cash flow off of what? The production of energy and commodities, which form the basis for an economy. This is where I somewhat disagree with Martin Armstrong about that. The value of a currency comes from the value of the labor of within the labor potential within the economy. I think it's one step deeper than that. The real source is the ability of that labor to efficiently create and generate the collateral necessary to run a real economy, because labor efficiency means nothing if you have no input goods to turn into higher order goods.
Like activating Keystone Pipeline, right?
Well,
like the Keystone is the collateral, right? Not the labor that fundamentally the Keystone,
not the labor that built the pipeline or the labor that maintains the pipeline or the labor that takes the oil, right? It's the Keystone, and then everything else is built off of that. First order goods become second order goods, become third order goods, become fourth order goods, become 30th order goods, and then we have an iPhone, right? So without the Keystone Pipeline, there are no iPhones. There's no AI revolution. There's no robots to do all the work. There's no nothing. There's none of this crap that comes out of the heads of these academics and eggheads and narcissistic abusers known as the World Economic Forum without that. And they know this. They're not stupid. They don't want the end of oil. That's bullshit. They want the end of our producing cheap oil. Because why? They don't have any.
So folks, this year I've given you so many reasons to try Balance of Nature, but I've got one now you cannot ignore. Let's review some of these other reasons. First, with Balance of Nature, you get a product made from whole fruit and veggie ingredients. Second, they can provide you with so many things you could be missing. Third, it could be just what you've been looking for to make you feel better. And of course, I take them. But I think that you'll agree this reason trumps them all. During November, with my special promo code, you'll get their Black Friday savings all month long. So folks, use my discount code SETH, S-E-T-H, and sign up as a new customer to get 50% off plus free shipping. As always, you get their money back guarantee. This is an unbelievable discount. But if you use my discount code SETH, Seth, you'll get the discount. So folks, call them at 800-2468-751. Again, that's 800-2468-751 and use discount code Seth, or order online at balanceofnature.com. And remember, use discount code Seth to get 50% off plus free shipping.
So where are they going to get the oil and the lithium and the cobalt and the tungsten and the aluminum and the nickel and the natural gas and the wheat and the corn and the this and the coal and all the things they're going to need to run their modern economy, to run their ever more perfect technocratic utopia, their EU-SSR? It's all in Russia. It's all in the Donbass. It's all in the Middle East. And what do they want? They want to destroy the United States. Why? Because the other half of that big pile of shit that they need is in Canada and the United States. Europe's got nothing. Europe has the unquenchable envy of Marxism and a lot of beautiful old capital that they built off of their old colonialist model. That's about it.
So basically, the chicken's coming home to roost, and the European banks, because fundamentally they don't have the commodities and the natural resources that exist in Russia, America, for example, that the reality is catching up, and their system is collapsing.
Right, and why the Bank of England is facing an existential threat is because they, along with all of these European globalists, promised trillions of dollars of future cash flows off of breaking up Russia and Ukraine and bringing it under Western control for them to underwrite the beginning of their brave new world. And Putin said, "Niet." And he's still saying "niet." And so now where are we today? Well, we keep seeing move, counter move. Now, it's a very complicated game board, right? Ultimately, could be easily a 6-player game of Dune, or however you want to put it, or a 9-player game of diplomacy, or whatever. You can be whatever metaphor you want to use. When I went to the Ron Paul Institute on Foreign Policy two years ago, I described it as a 7-player game of Go. Well, 7-player game of Go never ends, because if you know anything about Go, there are no stable structures when 6 other people get to go before you get to go. I think everybody can break down everybody else's structures. So the board never fills up. People are just capturing stones off of each other all the time. And really, the points you score don't even matter, because the game can't ever end. So who's going to win this game? A game that never ends has no winner unless you flip the game board. And you're the guy who flips the game board and then starts a new game.
Which is why they want World War III.
Now, as we go along, and as we watch this whole system play, watch all these factions play themselves out. At the end of the day, they run out of options, start narrowing down, winnowing down to the point where we're down to they have one move left. Flip the game board. Which is what I warned about 2 years ago, and it's where we are today.
And is that move poke the bear enough so that Putin then nukes some sort of European country and World War III resets everything? Is that their last move?
No, it's a classic move of narcissistic abusers, which says if I can't have the world,
No
neither
one
can you.
can. I see.
It's literally nihilism taken to its extreme. It's extreme. So where are we this morning? We're recording this on the Tuesday sorry, what the hell's
Thursday the
today?
21st.
Thursday the 21st. I literally this week has been so freaking busy. I don't even remember what day it is, folks. We're recording this now. Where are we? Well, literally 2 hours ago, Matt Gaetz just withdrew his nomination as AG, which I think is an expression of how much of finding out how I now in hindsight, I'm looking at it going, that was bait to see how much political capital they were willing to spend to keep Matt Gaetz from becoming AG. They've decided that he's going to be the senator from Florida as opposed to attorney general, because that's what's going to happen next. He's going to replace Marco Rubio. What's going to happen here is that they're going to try and block all of Trump's picks, every one of them. And we just found out how much what they're willing to go to. Expect Trump's counter move to be recess appointments or the Vacancies Act of 1998 or something along those lines. He's going to make a major move here and put everybody else in place. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, the swamp didn't win here. The swamp just thinks it won. What you're seeing, they're still counting votes in a lot of the battleground states. They still refuse to call a lot of House elections and Senate elections and all this rotten nonsense. I think they're setting up for a 1913 style coup like they did and that created the Federal Reserve in the first place. And the directional election of senators and the income tax, which was a coup against the United States. And it was successful. All three of those things were terrible. All three of those things led us to where we are today, the inheritors of the British Empire, having adopted British foreign policy, British monetary policy, British fiscal policy, British this, all this shit. All it. The only and at the same time, the British export Monty Python to us, and we think that they're just a bunch of useless and post imperial upper class twits. Wrong. Very fucking wrong, because these people still have a lot of potency. We get the Gray Zone article from 2 days ago or a few days ago detailing for us just how deeply embedded a group called Project Alchemy was in setting the tempo for the escalation and the planned escalation of the Russia-Ukraine war, stepwise at every moment. And how wrong they've been, but they continue to run the plan. Continue to run. They're one of the verticals within, the Gantt chart at Evil Corp Central that I keep talking about, and they're one of them. And on their timeline, this, if this happens, then we do this. Trump wins. 2 weeks later, Joe Biden, who clearly voted for Trump, clearly cut a deal with Trump to pardon his family and secure his legacy, isn't really president. So we get a New York Times report that Biden approved long-range missiles, ATACMS, to attack Russia. And they probably fired a couple of those. The ones that we already gave them with a 100-mile range. But 48 hours later, there's strikes inside Russia, 140 miles in. So now the question is, what are they trying to do? Well, I think what they're trying to do is now within, and between those two events, we start hearing chatter about the 25th Amendment. Let's get rid of Biden. Oh my God, I can't believe he did this. Biden didn't issue this order. Folks, it was just reported in the New York Times by who? Of course, the intelligence agencies. So this happens, you blame it on Biden, and then you go for 25th Amendment. They're keeping the Senate open with all these, stupid judge appointments, and Elizabeth Warren's out there quote tweeting herself all day long about how she's live blogging them staying in session. And why? Because they need to keep Congress open. Because they're planning on something. I think they're waiting for the following. They're going to try a 25th Amendment on Biden. Again, I may be schizo posting here, but this is what I see. This is one possible path that they're going to take. Maybe I'm wrong. They're going to try and go for a 25th Amendment removal of Biden. Because now Biden, as commander in chief, is standing in the way of the Americans coming in on the side of Ukraine. Because he's made a deal with Trump to end the war and end all of this. Because Joe Biden doesn't care about any of these people. They fucked him out of $300 million. You know, when you start thinking about Don Joe, you know, Don Biden Leone, and these people are all mob bosses. You fuck a mob boss over, you know, he goes score shirts on you. I know, I'm Italian. I know how that works. Like in my head, in my gut. Like this is the way you deal with these people. I mean, there are other mob bosses are not particularly. Everybody's got one, but let's just, you know. So every ethnicity has their own version of the mafia, you know, right? So the Italians are just smarter than everybody. So I get the, you know, sorry. So what do you got, right? You've got that 25th Amendment, get rid of Joe. You can easily get Kamala Harris and 2/3 of the cabinet to go along with this. Then it goes to Congress. Now you just start arm twisting Congress. They're all scared to death that Trump's going to take office, and half of them are going to jail because they're all traitors. So will we see the Uniparty try to get rid of the sitting president? Yes. Install Kamala Harris as commander in chief. Well, that doesn't mean anything. She's not going to do it. Well, Putin has to do, no, Putin doesn't have to do shit. Like, you've never heard of the concept of false flag? The Brits have already pulled off at least 3 false flags during this war that they've tried to blame on the Russians. Bucha, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the Kakhovka Dam. Every one of these. Nord Stream 2, they tried to blame Russia for the Nord Stream 2 bombing, for fuck's sake, these people. Okay? Like, nothing is below them. Ask anybody they've ever conquered. Fucking people with bad teeth and worse diet. Holy shit. Worse cuisine, sorry. British cuisine should be an oxymoron. So
this is interesting because I've looked at, you know, and I've painted my own picture in my head of what's happening, and I really do believe that what we're seeing is the dismantling of this very evil system that has ruled this world for a very, very long time. But I haven't looked at it from this perspective. I've looked at it in the collapse of the mainstream media, you know, what's happening with big tech. I've looked at it in all different vectors, and I've come to a very similar conclusion.
And those are valid vectors. Yeah, those are valid vectors.
Absolutely. But this, what you're telling me, I think is actually, it's one of the giant puzzle pieces that is much more important than all the other ones, right? Because, you know, it's like all wars are bankers' wars, right? And so what you're saying here is that basically the banking, the European banking cartel, to simplify its name,
for lack of a better term,
is basically nearing its end. Like it's on the verge of collapsing because they're holding so much U.S. debt, because Powell knows that he keeps interest rates high. He's bleeding them out. They're running out of options. They lent all this money to Ukraine, hoping that something was going to happen with how that war played out. They could then use that to pay off all their debts. That's not working out. So they're kind of stuck holding the hot potato.
They've tried to issue Eurobonds, and they've failed miserably. They've tried to create a European bond index for BlackRock to sell to the world. They've tried all of these things, and they're not working.
Because no one wants it.
They're not working because, so now we're at the stage of, yeah, so we can't do that, then we blow everything up. And we try to blame Putin for using nuclear weapons by going there first.
But if Putin has his soccer ball exchange with Trump, and he's also in the same way that, you know, I believe that Biden, you know, both Jill and Joe voted for Trump. So if Putin is also doing that, he knows what's going on. He's trying to protect his country from the central banking system. And so they're now kind of teaming up to maybe.
You don't want to use those. You don't want to use those terms. You want to say that they're traveling in the similar direction.
Or they have a mutual enemy.
Yeah, they have a mutual. They like. The way I'm writing it up for my my Newsmax podcast, Newsmax newsletter, that I literally just wrote these words before we hop on the call. So I'm working on that issue. I said, look, Putin is many things. ignorant of the depth of British hatred for all things Russia, and its and its attempts at and its destruction of the Russian people over the last 200 years is not one of them.
Yeah.
And so Putin has played this whole thing perfectly, because he couldn't shock and awe his way into across Ukraine. That would easily have gotten the world on against him. It would have been a much easier sell of this narrative that, oh, Putin is going to blitzkrieg across Ukraine and Poland's next and this and that, and then they're no, block by block, street by street, demilitarize Ukraine. And if you look very carefully, and I was talking with my partner Dexter White about this the other day, I said we have fundamental disagreements about how Putin has handled the war and what his aims are and everything else. And it's good. It's always a good and healthy disagreement because it error checks each other. But I said, do yourself a favor and really look at, go on YouTube and watch any of these guys who are, handling or covering the thing on a day-to-day basis, Military Summary or, Weeb Union or any of these websites that are now literally just clickbait grifting. There's nothing's happening. And this is clearly how this war is ending, but that's fine. They did yeoman's work when it was necessary. You go look and you see the layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of Ukrainian trenches and in place defenses and this and that and everything else. And the Russians are just grinding out every freaking one of them. And the last ones are about to fall. And then it's open field running to the Dnieper River. And the Russians have spent very few men and have rotated an awful lot of men through that war zone, and now have I would say, probably the most battle-hardened army on the planet, other than maybe the Syrians, which is why the Israelis better keep it in their pants, because they could wind up in a six-front war very quickly if they don't watch themselves. That's why they keep trying to get the Americans to come onto their side, and the British keep fomenting things and escalating things and allowing Netanyahu to go freaking crazy. Why? Because they're trying to get a major war started, because they need that war. They need to have the excuse to collapse their system, win, and replace it with their preferred outcome. And they don't know how to do anything else. They're now running around crazily doing stuff that is truly and utterly reckless. I wish, it's a couple of weeks ago, I was using the metaphor of the end of the Miracle on Ice as a way to describe what's going on at Davos, or Evil Corp Central, as I like, because Evil Corp Central actually has multiple verticals, and one of which is Davos, another one is the British remnant. Then you've got the Jewish Zionists, you got the Christian Zionists, you got these guys, you got the Chinese, you got Chinese actors, you've got the Middle Eastern actors, you've got Indians, everybody's in. There's the whole group of various verticals, some more powerful than others. Think of it like Microsoft under Steve Ballmer, right? There's the Windows and the Office verticals. Those are the two most powerful, Davos and the British remnant. Then you got all the other ones. It's actually, by the way, that's where all the good stuff at Microsoft was. But I don't even want to get into a discussion on that. But it's very similar to that. But go back to the Miracle on Ice. Go back to that last 2 minutes of that game, all right? And if you've watched the movie Miracle with Kurt Russell, where we get that moment where it's the last minute of the game. We're up by a goal. The Russians are putting unbelievable pressure on Jim Craig and the boys. They got us hemmed in our own end, or running around screaming like hit chickens with their heads cut off. And Tikhonov doesn't pull his goaltender. And there's that great line where it dawns on Kurt Russell, Herb Brooks, he doesn't know what to do. And is only at that moment that he finally says, oh my God, we can actually win this game. Because Tikhonov had never been in a position to lose a game like this with this much pressure. And what was going through Tikhonov's head at that point? It wasn't losing the game. It wasn't winning the game. It was, what happens to me when I lose? What happens to my players when they lose? They're all going to get they may get sent to the gulag. I mean, this, all of that system, all that pressure that those men were under. And then they were men, and they were good, and a lot of them were good men. We know, we watched them play half of them we watched play in the NHL, right? Or many of them we watched play in the NHL. And they were just gripping the sticks, nervous. Oh my God, how could we lose? Davos has never been in this position before. They don't know what this feels like. They've always been in control of all this stuff. And now they're about to lose. And they don't know how to deal with it. And so you can see how they've reacted to Putin over the last 7 years. Or 9 years now. I keep forgetting it's not 2022. Like that, his intervention in Syria was literally 9 years ago, and Crimea is 10 years ago now. God, I've been doing this way too long. Because to me, this is all like yesterday's history. Like, you know what I mean? Like those moments are so important that to me, they're like they happened yesterday, but they didn't. They happened almost 10 years ago now. You're like, their escalatory framework from a geopolitical perspective and from a financial perspective and everything else, they've gone nuclear on Putin multiple times. First sanctions, nuclear level sanctions, then, you know, nuclear level, first SWIFT, first kick him out of the G7 or the G8, then, you know, sanctions, and then, you know, the shock and awe sanctions of, and, you know, the ruble crisis and the oil shock of 2014, 2015. And then, you know, the Maidan, this, that, all of this stuff. Like they keep going nuclear on him and he keeps standing. And none of it works because he knows exactly how to play these people, which is you keep drawing it out because eventually they will draw themselves out. And they will draw out all of their capital and they will expend everything. Just like I said, I think what Matt Gaetz was bait. I think Putin has dangled bait out there many times. He doesn't want it to. He's like literally said to them, let's cut a deal. Nope, you lost this round. Let's cut a deal. Nord Stream 2, let's cut a deal. Oh, you're going to get rid of South Stream? Fuck you, cut a deal. I'm going to build Nord Stream, cut a deal. No. Bad Russian, no biscuit. Bad Russian, no biscuit. Same time, over and over and over and over and over again. He's like, fine. So the British and the Ukrainians shoot Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. He responds by sending supposedly ICBMs. We won't admit that they're ICBMs. Nobody wants to admit that they're probably the space-based rockets that he's just got sitting up there on satellites, and he can just rain them down from below, rain from above that no one can even deal with because they're not even ballistic. You know, if he has the weapon that the Sarmat or whatever that thing is that you know it's powered by an onboard nuclear power, dirty nuclear power plant, and you know probably has lasers up on it as well to shoot low Earth orbit satellites out of space. Like that thing's not very difficult to put together. Everybody, you know, the technology for strapping a Gen 1 nuclear reactor onto a missile and sticking it and having it circle the Earth all day long, their doomsday device, it's old technology in many ways. There's nobody's had the balls to build it. He has, though. And now the question is that what he shot at Dnipropetrovsk last night?
So
whoa, we're in a different world. And then to think that these people are going to go again one step further, then they want to be nuked. And I'm telling everybody that I know right here, right now, if you're living in London, you're the target. It's not Kiev. Putin knows where. He's been telling us for 2.5 years, almost 3 now. I know who's doing this. Watch the Anglo-Saxons, not the Americans. They effectively just declared war on the British, but not the Americans, even though we're supposedly implicated in all of this. We have been implicated by all this because the British put out a fucking meme that they're trying to blame us for, when it's clear that we don't want to do this. Well, there are people within the United States power structure that still want to do this because they work for that same group of people. But America doesn't want it. Donald Trump doesn't want it. None of his cabinet picks want it. They've all been signals that this is over. Even Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. It's a clear signal that we want to refocus foreign policy on Latin America and walk away from Asia. And that we'll fight an economic war through trade and tariff, policy with Asia and the BRICS, but not a kinetic war. Trump wants nothing to do with that. So we've got 60 days or so to get through. And between now and then, there's going to be an attempted coup to keep Trump from being sat, meaning they're going to try and I still think they're going to try and, they're going to try and corrupt the electoral college vote. I think they are. I think they're setting up for it. I don't know that they're going to be successful. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that I think that that's likely to work. It all depends on how much pressure and how many manila envelopes are being slapped on desks all around Washington right now, from Wall Street to the military industrial complex to the intelligence communities and everything else. Who's going to win that war? And then, of course, we have the deconfliction line between Russia and the United States. And anybody who tells you that they're not speaking right now is out of their fucking minds. They are.
So
They
Trump,
may be doing it through back channels. They may be doing it through third parties, but they're still doing so.
so Trump must be aware of all this we're talking about and far more. So when he talks about this golden age and this shift, it's something that is based upon this. If we live in an age where the European banking cartel has collapsed and it's no longer ruling, through these tentacles, that's a pretty significant shift. Like, that's a golden age that is like nothing that we've known in our lifetimes and the generations before us. That's a huge shift.
We haven't realized this in 500 years. This is the end of 500 years of history. I like to start at the formation of the Bank of England in 1694 because it augurs in the beginning of the age of central banks, but it's probably earlier than that. And there are other people out there who are far more qualified to talk about that history than I am. So I'll just leave it at that.
Incredible. Well, Tom, I feel like this has been one of the most fascinating conversations I've had in a very long time. Like I'm glued to this. But
it is fascinating, isn't it? I wouldn't even say that it's that again, I'm not, I don't know that I'm right about, even all of, or not a majority of this. I hope in many ways that I am both right and tragically wrong, and that the people who were just empowered understand what the next move is to counter what the moves that have been put on the table. That's what I'm hoping. I mean, there's a reason why I'm still doing podcasts and not, bugging out to, I don't know where at this point, like, getting my family onto a plane, I don't know, to Guatemala or whatever, someplace, right? It's an unacceptable level of risk that even at this moment in time, I mean, but again, that we're, having to discuss the possibility of somebody throwing a nuke. And to everybody in the audience who may or may not even believe that nukes exist, they exist. And that's just cope, because you can't deal with the reality of the situation. The earth isn't flat. They can't create hurricanes. We went to the moon and there are nukes. Those are 4 bullshit things that have been thrown out there to make you disbelieve in the potency of of what's been created in order to maintain this system. And those are all things that have been pumped into the zeitgeist to fracture and seed malinformation of both an unearned omnipotence by these people, because they're not omnipotent, they're not even very powerful. They can't create hurricanes, folks. And to denigrate any great human achievement like going to the moon. It's part of the demoralization plan. You're better off believing all those things, you're better off disbelieving anything that, you know, has been put out there for you to chew on. Because they're probably, you have to, it's not, you're, what I'm saying is they put those things out there because their real plan is demoralization. They want you to look down at your feet and worry about the abyss that's opening up in front of you rather than look up and see Elon Musk throw rockets up into the sky and then catch them. And that's what we should be. And that's the promise, both metaphorically and physically. It's right there. It's right in front of you. And all we got to do is get rid of these fucking people. TFP is why I call them, just these fucking people. Look at this. And that's all we got to do. But that's a big task.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Roll up your sleeves, folks. We got work to do, but it can be done. Now, do you want to do it? Or do you just want to, you know, whine about it? Because if you want to whine about it, hey, there are plenty of vacancies over in the Libertarian Party. Have fun. I'm not interested. I gave that shit up for Lent 20 years ago. And I'm not even Catholic anymore. Mazel tov. I'm not Jewish either. I'm not anything, obviously.
Well, there we go. So let me, as we're kind of concluding here, I want to put up your website so folks can follow you and what you're writing about. Obviously Twitter, I recommend folks follow you on Twitter. Here's your it's at TFL 1728. Your webpage, goldgoatsandguns.com. It's goldgoatsandguns.com. And yeah, Tom, thank you for this discussion. I've got a lot to think about. I learned a lot. There's probably an equal number of new questions I have that I
Sure.
thought, you know, which is good. Like, that's what I want. Like, I want to constantly be changing what I think is how the world works, because I'm not some super genius, right?
No. I mean, the thing is that this is what we do every day, right? Is we're constantly trying to, you know, sharpen the pencil, draw a better picture. I'm a terrible artist, so I got to draw pictures geopolitically, right? Or you got to, you know, and I'm only a halfway decent musician. The point being is that it's the search for it's not the search for truth as much as it's the search for meaning. Facts are on themselves, in and of themselves, are not interesting. Tracing this fact may lead to that fact and that fact and that fact. If you can't synthesize those facts into something that has a picture that has meaning, then those facts are uninteresting. I mean, that's what's important. And so everything else is, you know, and there's a lot of fact, you know, uncovering, but there's not as much synthetic and syncretic analysis being done. And I don't, you know, I'm not in, I look for facts and ask questions about what they mean. Why asking the question all the time, why do they want us to know this right now, is probably the most important question of our age. If you can do that on a regular basis, if you can step back from the abreaction of whatever just happened and ask that question, because again, why the origin of the tweet, right? So the inciting incident for this podcast, if the story of this podcast, and this is the inciting incident of it, was my tweet about Jerome Powell, understand that what that was born out of was the timing of the attack on the Federal Reserve chair the day after the election, the day after the FOMC meeting, which was the day after the election. They immediately went into end the Fed mode to activate the libertarians to carry their water for them. They know exactly what they were doing. And that to me is what was so important. But if you hadn't come across the way I view the world, and that's fine. And I'm not saying that, you know, my view is the correct one, but if you've never even been exposed to that idea or ever thought about it from that perspective, why would anybody, you know, oh my God, great, we finally get a chance to attack the Fed. Well, did you ever think that on October 8th of last year, it was all of a sudden really fashionable to criticize the Jews after 25 years of not being able to criticize the Jews? Did you ever think maybe that was part of the psyop, folks? What strategic goal does that serve? Right? And I know that this, we're supposed to be wrapping up here, but that's the really important point. It's not that, and I've taken a lot of criticism, I've taken a lot of heat for refusing to take a side in Israel Gaza. Don't take a side in Israel Gaza for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is, one, I don't believe either of them are blameless or faultless, and two, the whole thing serves a grander geostrategic purpose that's far more cynical and far more disgusting than anything that Israel's done in the last 13 months. As bad as that is. Because it serves the geostrategic interest of these people who gave us the freaking COVID mRNA vaccine. That's killing millions of people every fucking month. Like, this is what you're dealing with. And you're going to just like abreact about what Israel's doing? That's the point. It's not that what Israel's done is not terrible. Is that there's even greater evil in the world than that. And if you get caught up in that, in that evil, you miss this evil, and they're happy about that. You get to feel self-righteous and correct. Emotionally, it's really vicious when you stop to really think about what they're laying on the table here. That's how vicious and vile these people are. That they would sacrifice tens of thousands of Gazans and Israelis and Jews and everybody else in the hope that we can get a new pogrom against Jews to let them continue to do what they're doing.
I think
that's why it's incumbent upon every one of us, Seth. This is the point, and every one of us to constantly be looking for that deeper truth and that deeper meaning. That's the point. And don't get caught up in the games they want us to play.
Yeah.
And if we can teach, and if I can be a small part of teaching that skill set to more people, we can beat these people. Because that's how we create a golden age. That's it. That's why I do what I do the way I do it. I don't shill for anyone. Hell, I didn't even bring up the fact that you didn't mention my Patreon. I can give a shit. If you like what I do, I have a Patreon. Go do it. Give me money or not. I don't care. We have a world to save, folks. Let's go fucking do it. Let's do it right. Because otherwise, we're looking at, this is the thing that really bothers me. This is the thing that scares me more than anything else. I feel like Paul Atreides. Because I can see the jihad. I can see the Fremen jihad coming. I warned about this 4 years ago. I can see it coming from the right. I don't want that to happen. I want everybody to walk out. I want me to, and all of us to walk out there and go, you guys are cute. You're hilarious. We're not doing that anymore. Next. You guys are cute. You're hilarious. We're not doing that either. We're doing this. Drill, baby, drill. Give us rational pricing of risk. And eventually we'll get rid of the central banks, and we'll pick a new system. And maybe it's Bitcoin, maybe it's gold. I don't care. Whatever. We'll figure that out later. Let's have fun. But have fun doing it. I'm out. Done. I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Tom. It was great.
Well,
it was great. Mr. Wade Lightheart, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to speak with you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you are the co-founder of Bioptimizers, and which is something that I'm a big believer. I'm a huge believer in magnesium, and my wife and I we're all about health, but not health, which is like, hey, Fauci, what should I inject into myself next? Like, health of, going back to like what I believe God gave us, right, to stay healthy. But right now, though, I'd say that what a lot of people are experiencing is stress, maybe a little bit less stress now, post-election, but who knows what's coming next. But inability to sleep, just overall anxiety. And so how do you approach, I know you're a health fanatic, bodybuilder, you understand the human body very, very well. So how would you approach that with somebody?
Yeah. So, fundamentally, all of the elements that we need were essentially supposedly built into our diet. But our diet's changed radically over the last 100 years, particularly with conventional farming, the use of fertilizers, pesticides, all these elements. And in North America, what that has led to is massive magnesium deficiencies. And people go, okay, well, I take a magnesium or whatever. But here's the data and what's really impactful, because we're looking at the average person needs just under 500 milligrams of magnesium a day. Whatever diet strategy that you are going after, keto, plant-based, vegetarian, if it fits your macro, whatever, carnivore, you are not going to be able to get enough magnesium if you're currently living in North America, because it's simply not present in the soil, and that's been accelerated. So that's accelerated through what the cattle eat, or what your meat sources are, or plant people. And magnesium, I call it the miracle mineral. And the reason for that is it's involved in over 600 functions. It controls blood sugar, heart rhythm. It is a vasodilator, which means it opens up your arterial supply for blood flow. It also has a calming effect on the nervous system. It's a key element in how your microbiome works. It regulates electrolyte levels. It maintains the ratio between calcium and magnesium. And if you don't have it, there's a good chance that many, or all of your magnesium dependent functions, 600 of them to no less, are suboptimal. And what do you experience? You experience a level of stress, a level of anxiety, an inability to calm down. It oftentimes shows up in sleeping. It shows up as becoming overstimulated from caffeine. By the way, if you're a caffeine drinker, that reduces your absorbability of caffeine, or of magnesium, excuse me. Heart palpitations, of course, in these extreme cases are severe magnesium deficiency. PMS is another one. People who suffer from high levels of PMS find supplementing with magnesium can alleviate that. And then the final piece is the building of neurochemicals in your brain. So people who are on antidepressants particularly are really susceptible for low magnesium levels, as is the general public, because it's a key element in building neurochemicals like serotonin, which makes you feel good. So what we have found is that if you don't feed the bacteria enough magnesium, they're not able to produce, which 95% of that's built in your gut, the neurochemicals that make your brain operate. And so many people are using prescriptions, which will accelerate it. And then there's one other piece. We live in an electromagnetic world. And what that means is our grandparents didn't have cell phones and electrical wires and all these sort of things that we're being subjected to now. The evidence suggests now that all of that stimulation actually increases our need for magnesium. So many of the RDAs are probably lower. And then there's a variance between genetics and lifestyle factors. If you're drinking caffeine, if you're, not sleeping well, if you're in high city environments where there's a lot of Wi-Fi and frequencies, and you're on the cell phone or on your computer a lot, those things are going to increase the draw of magnesium. And many of the regulations that have been set don't meet that. So a lot of people said, hey, I'm going to supplement with a magnesium. And I've been in this industry literally since I was 15 years old. So 37, 38 years now we're going on. I have never seen a product like magnesium deal with so many of these symptoms people are reporting. And it all comes back to, if you can get the elements that God put into the soil into your body, then your body knows how to use it. And if you don't have it, magnesium is one of those ones that you just can't manufacture or use an alternative for.
It's interesting because I saw this going around online recently. It's a handful of studies that have basically shown that, like here, for instance, this was from 2013, says magnesium supplementation beneficially affects depression in adults with depressive disorder. And I'm seeing a lot of people talking about this and say, wait, like I'm not saying I can cure depression, but that you can help depression with just magnesium supplementation, not going on and getting on some sort of benzodiazepine or anything that's going to, you're going to kill yourself trying to detox off of, right? So it makes sense though that, like, we garden, and plants need nutrients, and one of the most important things is building your soil. If your soil doesn't have the right kind of nutrients, you have to add that into them, with nitrogen fixers, et cetera. And so it makes sense that the human body is also an organic, entity like a plant is, and that we need the building blocks to be healthy and to grow. And if our soil, which is where it should be coming from, which I think is also a really important point, that if our soil doesn't have it, then we're not going to have it. And so just like that plant's not producing very good peppers, we're going to be depressed and angry all day because we don't have our the things we have in us. So um, now, but with magnesium though, is it so the recommended dose? But it sounds like that we have a deficiency far greater than what they're even saying because of 5G towers everywhere, cell phones in our pockets, Starlink, any number of things that we're dealing with. I mean, like I'm sitting in front of 15 different monitors here, so I'm like cooking my magnesium probably. So how much magnesium should the average adult be taking? And the other question is, can you take too much magnesium?
Yeah, great question. There's going to be a significant variability based on lifestyle and genetics. So the world of genetics and epigenetics means that you may have the great genes to absorb magnesium, or you might have poor genes for magnesium. If you're a caffeine drinker or not a caffeine drinker, if you're in a high wireless environment or a low wireless, or in front of screens or not in front of screens, all of those are contributing lifestyle factors, which will create a big variability for people. If you go back to the RDA, I think they recommend about 360 milligrams of elemental magnesium. Many of the magnesium out there doesn't provide a lot of elemental magnesium. So you'll see magnesium stearate on your, some filler and think, oh, I'm getting magnesium from it. No, you're not. That's just filler. It's not really absorbable. So when we did our deep dive, we have a lab in Bosnia with literally 20 PhDs and master students that do tests to show not only does the magnesium get into your body, because it's a single canal from your mouth to your bum. It's not in your body, it's in the canal. It's got to translate through the microbiome. That's a little probiotics and bacteria thing that converts that into the building blocks to the neurochemicals. When we talked about serotonin, 95% is built in your gut by these bacteria, and magnesium is a key element to it. So if you're missing magnesium, that's why a lot of people aren't able to produce those neurochemicals. And that's why magnesium supplementation is now becoming in vogue inside of alternative psychophysiological protocols that people are developing. And I can't comment them as a doctor, but my wife's studying PhD in neurophysiology. And this is kind of where the new technology is addressing conditions through nutrition. Now, with different magnesiums, though, different types of magnesium have different absorbabilities, and we believe that they can be taken up by different parts of the body. So when we tested virtually every magnesium molecule, there's malate and orotate and citrate, and you're going to see it. Which one's the best? Some like magnesiums like citrate will draw more water into the intestines, and that, if you take too much of, can create the runs. Citrate is the most popular one because it's the cheapest. It's also the one that's going to have the most side effects. So a little bit, if you're constipated, is good. Too much, you get the runs. Things like bisglycinate and orotate are very high things, as well as malatate. Some of them have been shown for blood sugar. Some get more into neurochemistry, into your brain. Some get more into heart rhythms and vasodilation. So what we did is we put our team together to figure out all of this stuff to see, well, which one's best? And it turns out none are the best. But if you combine a bunch of different magnesiums, you get a synergistic result that is bigger than the addition. In other words, the compound, and we found that 7 types of magnesium in specific volumes showed the best results, both at the microbiome level and also when we looked at the cells of, does it get absorbed by the cells of your body? And so thus magnesium breakthrough came to fruition. And now we are the fastest growing magnesium in the market in retail. We're already second in Amazon. And a lot of these people is because they haven't dealt with magnesium. Like they have never had a magnesium product like this. And if you've tried any magnesium and you go to this one, you are going to feel and see the difference. We recommend starting at 2 caps a day. You can do them just before bed or 1 in the morning, 1 at night. And if you're still feeling stressed or jittery from caffeine or not having sleeping, just add 1 capsule periodically to your thing. So you might try it for a week and then say, okay, I'm going to go to 3 for a while. Eventually, you'll hit what's called saturation. In other words, you'll be able to titrate down probably to 2 caps a day, but that might take a few months to get there.
Okay, so here I've got the website up here, bioptimizers.com. So basically, this magnesium breakthrough right here. So that you obviously, this looks like something you can stir into a drink, but you also have the capsule form. And I'll say actually, just as a side note, that my youngest, my older daughter, when she was younger, when she was 1 to 2 years old, she had trouble with constipation. And we're looking for different kinds of solutions and changing her diet. We used Miralax a couple of times, which I regret so much because I ended up finding out it has all kinds of really bad side effects, of course. But we found out actually that magnesium, a little bit of magnesium, was all she needed. That helped pull water into her intestinal tract, and then that was it. It solved the problem. So now it's funny, we call it special water. And so sometimes before bed, just say, hey, do you want your special water, right? Because she stirs a little bit in there and drinks it, and it's a little bit of a reward for her. So I've also noticed myself that when taking it, that I sleep better. I'm more rested. I wake up, sometimes I feel like I'd wake up kind of like the world's on fire. It's like, oh gosh, like what's going on? So it's more of a smooth wake up. And it just, overall, it's just, you feel better. Like my muscles don't cramp as much from working out. There's all kinds of benefits for it. And so basically though, what you're saying is that like not all magnesium is the same. There's a lot of big brand magnesium out there that might just have, 1 or 2 forms. So you're saying that, Magnesium Breakthrough has, what is it, like 7 different types of magnesium?
Seven different forms. We have it available in a powder, also in a cap. Some people like to drink because it's tasty and fruity, and some people really like it. Athletes particularly, because they have higher levels of magnesium because it's the relaxation part of your muscles. So yeah, you just kind of take it, and super easy. And the best part about our company is we have a 365-day money-back guarantee. If you're on magnesium and you try ours, and it's not blows away your other magnesium, we ask, please let us refund your money. Number 2, if you've never tried magnesium, say, I don't know, I'm not sleeping as well as I could have. I'd like to improve my sleep, or I'd like to feel a little bit more relaxed or less stressed. If you don't feel that within the first week or 2, let alone 365 days, we humbly request to get our money back. But guess what? We have the lowest refunds in the entire industry, the best customer service. You can talk to real people. And I believe that you have a discount that you can offer.
I do actually. Yeah. So bioptimizers.com/whole house, HOLEHOUSE, or just using Whole House at the checkout. Folks will get a discount on the order. And my recommendation is just putting it on auto, but just so you get it every month, because
bigger savings.
It's bigger savings. And to me, it's like, I'm not a big believer. I don't have a whole medicine cabinet full of things, but to me, magnesium is one of the core, supplements that I will take every day. Magnesium, creatine, like a very, very pure creatine, a few other things like that. To me, it's just overall brain, physical health. You can't beat it. So Wade, thank you so much for chatting with us today. I'll bring up the website one more time so folks can see it. So bioptimizers.com. Some people call it biooptimizers, but I think you and I both, we talked about it before. So it's Bioptimizers officially. So bioptimizers.com/whole house, or just using Whole House at the checkout will get you a discount on that. So any final thoughts as we're wrapping up?
Yeah. Also, we have a wonderful course that's available when you go on the site called the Awesome Health Course. It's a free course, and it kind of outlines the 7 pillars that I've allowed people to go from sick to superhuman. It's a free course. It's not supplement oriented. It's actually lifestyle oriented. And so a lot of people, it's our most popular education course. It's absolutely free. And it helps the person discern between good information, where they need to prioritize their time, their money, and energy. We know the holidays are coming up. Probably everything's going to go off, the rails, as they say. But as you get into January, this can help you guide where you put your time, your effort, your energy for maximum results to feel the best that you can. It's just a little other value add. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to our staff. We have real people. It's not bots. It's not AI. It's real service agents that are there to answer any question that you have. And we'd love to hear from you.
Well, fantastic. I'm thinking, Thanksgiving coming up. It's like, okay, my mom makes the pumpkin roll. I usually eat about half one of the pumpkin rolls, and it's like I get in trouble with that. So it's good to have these things to help balance out. Well,
Berberine Breakthrough on the website. Berberine Breakthrough cuts blood sugar response a significant amount. A couple of those caps before those big meals is really good, and you'll get the same discount. Berberine Breakthrough. It's amazing for blood sugar.
Oh.
People who monitor their blood sugar are shocked about how it reduces the cravings as well as the blood sugar response inside of the body.
Well, there you go. So here's your eat this, and then you can eat as much pumpkin pie as you want.
Well, and the good news is that we are made in America, so you're buying American.
Oh,
and
good.
you're dealing with an American company. So really proud of that too.
And most importantly, you support independent American media like me, which is what keeps us on the air. So I'm humbly grateful for the opportunity to have you on, and thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
It's a two-way trail.